Hello everyone and welcome to Meet the Priest on Catholic 540 AM Divine Mercy Radio. Here we present you with the opportunity to meet and learn about the devout men in and around our diocese who have an amazing impact on our lives as Catholics. I'm your host, Mandy Howard, and today our guest is Father Joshua West. Thank you so much for being with us, Father.
Mandy, great to be with you this morning. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you currently assigned?
So I am the chaplain at NC State University, and I work with the college students both there, both at NC State and then some of the surrounding colleges as well. We have Meredith and Shaw University as well. We have some students that also join us for our different activities and liturgies and so forth.
Phenomenal. How long have you been there?
Just a year.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's been half a year of normal life and half a year of COVID.
Okay. Yes, and I'm sure that has changed everything.
Everything.
How long? So you have been here a year, so it literally has been, I guess, about 6 and 6 months, or about 5 and.
Yeah. I mean, it's been 5 months of normal college life and 7 months of COVID reality, trying to figure things out. So it's kind of funny being new in a position and then trying to figure out new things to do with all the COVID reality. So
Absolutely, and we will definitely talk more about that. But this is your first assignment in Raleigh, is that correct? Did you come for this assignment?
Correct. I came for this assignment. So I actually belong to a religious order called the Legionaries of Christ. And previously I was working in Chicago, and previous to that I was working in California. The bishop called up my religious superiors and said, hey, we are looking for a priest for the post there at NC State. My provincial came to me and said, hey, Father Joshua, are you interested in this opportunity? And I gave him a thumbs up, and so he said, all right, well, I'll get back in touch with you. And anyway, a few months later, he got back in touch with me and said, it's a go.
Yeah.
And so I came down, visited, and actually the first priest that I met, I know we're kind of
No, this is fantastic.
but
Yes.
The first priest that I met was actually Father Ty
Wow.
from the diocese, so he was the chaplain at the time at NC State, along with his vocation director of duties.
Mm-hmm.
And so he showed me around the campus and a little bit about the work, and so I went back to my provincial and I said, it looks great, and let's make it happen.
What a fantastic first person to meet. He put a wonderful face in our diocese. God rest his soul. It's certainly a loss to our diocese, Father Ty. We all love him.
Totally agree. Yeah, and even just in my own work here, I called him quite a few times. Just hey, how about this? What do you think about that? So just great man of wisdom and a lot of insight. So I enjoyed.
Were you joined by other priests from your order? Were you the only priest from your order that came for this assignment, or there were other Legionaries of Christ who came also? Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. There was another priest that came, so
Okay.
I showed up first, and I was probably here for about a month and a half, almost 2 months before Father Peter Devereaux showed up, and he worked with me last year at the ministry, and then but now this past year he was asked by the bishop if he could take over a parish.
Oh, phenomenal.
St. Joseph Parish. So.
Phenomenal. Okay, so
now I'm a Lone Ranger again.
So now Lone Ranger back at NC State. And let's backtrack way back. And what led you to first consider the priesthood?
That's kind of an interesting story. It's kind of funny if you ask me or if you ask my parents about that question, because I would say I first thought of the priesthood when I was about 20 years old. I was a sophomore, finishing up my sophomore year of college when I first thought of the priesthood. If you ask my dad would tell me that he actually threw it out to me when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, which I actually don't even remember that conversation.
Really?
But he says that he says when he threw it out, hey, what do you think about being a priest? And he says, I was so adamant about being about a no, that he actually said, wow, he must have really thought about it.
And almost like a doth protest too much kind of idea.
Yeah.
You had enough thought about it to
be so adamant about my no.
Where did you grow up?
Well, that's a good question. I grew up on an airplane. No, I'm just kidding. But I actually grew up all over the place. My dad worked for the military.
Okay.
He worked for the Department of Defense. And so we moved around all over the place. So I was actually born in Italy, on a military base. From there, we moved to Germany. So it wasn't until I was about 5 or 6 years old that I was immigrated by my parents to the United States. And there we lived in a few places in Virginia. And then actually, high school years were back in Italy, once again on a military base there.
That had to kind of inform your life and your faith in a lot of ways. But what was it about you as a child that made your father bring up the priesthood to you? Did he ever tell you?
No, I think, so this is just a guess, so I don't know.
Okay.
But my guess is my dad is a convert to the faith,
okay.
and he converted to Catholicism around, I must have been 10 or 11 or so years old. I don't remember my age. It's funny though, I do remember the day. It was Easter Day, and my dad probably wouldn't like me saying this story, but he has a fake tooth.
Okay, he's not alone.
and I remember him, he was in his bathroom brushing his fake tooth, and I walked in, and he goes, "Josh, today I'm becoming Catholic." And that's all I remember. So it was a great day for him, obviously, that he'd be there brushing his fake tooth, telling me that he was becoming Catholic.
Story.
So it must have been...
I feel like that's rife with symbolism, and I'm not quite getting it yet, but
exactly.
there's something there.
I'll think about it.
Yes.
I'll think about it.
Yes.
I'm sure my dad would love that story if I told it in a homily with him present.
Oh, sure.
He may stand up and protest. Don't embarrass me.
That's pretty funny. That's what we're here for. We got to pay him back for all their years of embarrassment, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, so you remember him converting to Catholicism, and that being a great day for him and for your family, I imagine.
Yeah.
Was your mom Catholic? Why did he find the faith?
Yeah. So my mom was always Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My mom was always Catholic, and and she never ever talked about the Catholic faith, or she never actually invited him to become Catholic. And actually for my dad, I think the moment where he said, "Yeah, I'm going to become Catholic," was one of my younger sisters was receiving her first communion, and she came back to the pew. Well, let me preface it. My dad would always go to Mass with us, so even though he wasn't practicing the Catholic faith, he was always there with us.
Sure.
Sleeping in the homilies, but he was there.
Oh, I'm sure Dad's going to love this interview.
Sorry. I love you, Dad. And so my sister came back to the pew after receiving her first communion, and she looked up at my dad and said, "Hey, Daddy, how come you don't receive first communion?" So he kind of says, that was kind of the moment where I said, "Yeah, I'm going to become Catholic." I'm sure he'd been thinking about it, but my mom, she never ever brought it up. She never invited him or asked him to become Catholic, and
let him get there on his own.
Yeah. So I mean, it took 15, 16 years of marriage for that to happen, but anyway, it finally happened.
I'm sure she was in tears at that celebration. I'm sure she was just overjoyed.
Funny enough, I don't even remember. I don't even remember the ceremony itself. I just remember the fake tooth part.
Okay.
But I don't even remember Mass itself. But yeah, I'm sure my mom was ecstatic about that.
So, and I kind of interrupted you to kind of give a little bit of your backstory and where you're from, but you said that you first considered it, you think, when you were 20. Where did you go to college?
So I went to a place called Carroll College in Helena, Montana.
Okay.
And really just the reasoning I knew nobody in Montana. I didn't even visit the school before I went. And it was, my parents were actually moving back to Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I thought, well, that's about 3,000 miles from my parents. And they had skiing and skydiving on the brochure, and I'm dead serious. That was the draw.
That seems enough.
I thought whether you get an education at Harvard, at the University of Virginia, or at Carroll College, it was all the same. Education was an education, and
you were looking for adventure.
I was looking for adventure, yeah. And actually, I have to be honest, I actually was not too interested in going to college.
Okay.
I was just much more interested in doing things, and I was actually looking for opportunities for kind of like service work after college. So my last year of college, I was actually looking more for that type of stuff than really looking for colleges. And I just couldn't find any places. They all the places that I investigated. This is all pre-internet, so it's a lot harder to investigate and look for organizations.
Greenpeace and like it kind of the
That-
big ones that everybody knew about.
Yeah.
And it was
And or they all wanted, doctors and engineers and people that knew something about
Sure.
life. And
That's
just a
awful.
punk out of high school. They weren't looking
who was
for that.
trying to avoid college and go skydiving. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, if that was what your resume
So-
said, that probably
Yeah, exactly.
probably hurt your chances a little bit.
Exactly.
But you're in college now. You found a fit, and what next? How were you going to Mass in college? Were you how did
no.
that? That's okay.
No,
You're not alone.
Yeah, actually, if I could go back to my high school
course.
years just a little bit,
Absolutely.
because my parents, when it came to confirmation, they actually asked, Josh, do you want to be confirmed?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is probably where the sword went right through my mom's heart, if I can use that analogy with Mary,
Sure.
because I told my mom I didn't know if I wanted to be Catholic all my life, and I
Wow.
wasn't interested in being confirmed. I'm confirmed today, but
I imagine that's one of the steps. Yes.
And so, kind of my senior year of high school, it was a battle for my parents to get me to go to Mass. Sometimes they left without me,
Mm-hmm.
and certain days they just want to fight. They didn't want to fight that fight. But anyway, my mom, she came to me in March of my senior year of high school and said, "Hey, Josh, there's a confirmation that's going to happen at the end of April, and our parish priest, he was a military chaplain on the military base there in Italy, and he's willing to do like 6 confirmation classes. So you just have to go to class for 45 minutes over 6 Sundays,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll be and then at the end you'll be confirmed."
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyways, I was like, "Okay, Mom, you said it nicely to make you happy. I'll do this." And so I did. I just did these 6 little classes, which once again, I don't remember anything. I just knew I was making my mom happy,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up being confirmed. Which, ironically enough, I was confirmed by a cardinal out
Wow.
of Rome. Cardinal Sciacca was his name.
That's pretty incredible.
Out of Rome, and anyway, so that confirmation happened, and anyway, and then obviously then when I went off to college, I just had no interest in the faith.
Sure.
So for the
You
first,
feel like you checked a box to make your mom happy.
yeah,
She was happy because
she
you
was
were
happy. I was
sent off
confirmed.
across the half the world. It probably felt like, and you were jumping out of a plane, but you were at least
Yeah,
confirmed.
exactly.
Yes. Okay.
And so anyway, so I was not going to church. First couple of years, I wasn't going to church,
Mm-hmm.
and then and then I think just not having a direction in my life in college. I was just so there just comes a point, I think, in everybody's life where you're just skiing and jumping out of airplanes and playing football just doesn't cut it,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just thinking, what am I going to do with my life? What are my goals and what am I looking for? And I just remember too. I sometimes got so sad laying in my bed
Sure.
during college that a couple of times had tears coming down my eyes.
Yeah.
Like I just don't have a direction in life. So then I started. That's kind of the door back into practicing my faith.
What was the first step you took? Do you remember?
Well, just going to Mass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just the first step, starting to go back to Mass. And actually Carroll College is actually a Catholic college.
Okay.
And, they offered Bible studies and they had groups that you could attend. I just wasn't interested in that type of stuff, but I started, going back to Mass. And then actually, probably kind of the big moment was, I wasn't dating this girl, but we were good friends,
Mm-hmm.
and probably would have gone in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
But she actually, between my sophomore and junior year of college, she invited me to Steubenville, to one of the Steubenville conferences.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like the high school conferences.
Sure.
Kind of more. Those are kind of more the jump up in the air, put your hands up in the air
Right,
type conferences. It was a young adult conference, more 18 to 30-year-old age group. And so she invited me there to this conference, and it was more, you're going, I'll go.
Of course.
type
That's all
reality.
right. That's it. Sometimes that happens. God put people in your life to
Amen.
bring you back in. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ash, I don't even know where she is now in life, but so anyway, so I went, and it was there actually at this conference. So I'm getting back into my faith, and then it was there at this conference where I first thought of being a priest.
Wow.
And so, I wasn't practicing my faith, over a long period of time when all of a sudden, boom, the priesthood, kind of popped into my mind.
Did it shock you when it first popped into your mind? Did it surprise you, or did it?
Well, so actually, there's a little story that happened at this conference at Steubenville. And that was, I actually ran into a guy that I had met in high school. That I knew in high school. So high school in Italy, and I run into a guy in Steubenville, Ohio, who I went to high school with. He graduated a year before me, but we knew each other.
That's pretty incredible.
And so that was amazing. So he introduces me to a friend of his by the name of John, and he goes, "Hey, John, he's thinking about being a priest." And then Eric was this guy's name, and Eric says to John, he goes, "Hey, actually, Josh here, he's thinking about being a priest too." And I was like, "What?"
No way.
And I never even thought of being a priest. But that's actually the moment when I first thought, wow, maybe I could, and I just think maybe I'm getting back into my faith. I'm in this holy environment, a lot of talks about the faith, and then they had an adoration chapel there, and I first thought, wow, maybe I could do this.
So that's at least the second time in your life that someone came to you and surprised you by saying, I think you're going to be a priest.
Even though I don't remember the first one, but but I don't believe my dad would lie. But yeah, so that was the second time that somebody said, maybe I could be a priest, and it was a joke. I mean, so actually, Eric, believe it or not, then I didn't see this guy. He was joking. I actually didn't even see this guy for a ton of years, and I ran into him like 6 months ago at a Focus conference in Arizona again. So
how did he react when he saw that you actually? Did he remember that he even joked about that?
Actually, I don't. I don't think I brought that up.
Okay.
And I don't even think he knows that was probably the first moment that that I first thought of being a priest. Though he did know that I had entered the seminary. He knew that I was a priest because we did have some phone conversations over the years. I mean, this is like a 20-year gap. But so we did have a few phone conversations over the years, but I'd never seen him. And then just coincidentally, I run into him at this conference.
So when did it get real? When did you go from it was just a thought in your head and maybe this is to joining the seminary or taking that step?
Yeah. So actually, after that first initial thought, I actually went back. So let me say, so I actually then transferred out of Carroll College and went back to Virginia Beach to join a community college.
Okay.
And then I was back living with my parents. And then actually one of the local parishes had 24/7 adoration. So I started attending that. And I had like a Tuesday night at like 10 p.m. or 10 p.m. So I did sleep through some of that. But anyway, I was there. But anyway, so that was just a great moment for me just to begin to reflect and just really think about, could I be a priest? Could I do this? But I'll be honest. And so I am going to Mass. I am, beginning to practice my faith. I did start to attend just kind of a small young adult group, during that time as well. But I still had other friends that, Friday and Saturday night.
Sure.
You're still
a young adult, still figuring things out. Yeah.
And so there was a lot of praying, just a lot of confession that went on during that time.
Yeah.
And then so here was the thought that so during that year that I was in adoration, I actually then met a priest that's a part of the order that I'm now a part of.
Okay.
And I think I was just first it was just a personal connection. I really liked this guy. He liked sports. I like sports. So anyway, it's just a great personal connection. He kind of talked about what their order does. Well, I should say my order now, but what the order does. And part of what he spoke about was kind of more missionary work. And so I felt like I just didn't want to be a priest that sat behind a desk. Nothing against priests that have to do that. It's all important work. But that was the idea in my head that a lot of priests spent a lot of time in their offices.
Sure.
And I wanted to be kind of like a little Father Indiana Jones. Like out there, in the jungle, third world. driving my little Jeep to all these little villages, celebrating Mass, weddings, for all these people that, maybe only get Mass, every whatever, 2-3 months.
Sure. And that kind of goes back to what your desire was when you were a teenager, when you were 18, and you were looking for that service work that all kind of culminated together.
Yeah. And anyway, so just in speaking with him, he was talking about, the order has mission territory down in southern Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And but nonetheless, you're still thinking, I got to be a priest, to do this. So that's a lot of prayer, a lot of discernment. And so during so I meet this order, and then I'm thinking specifically about this order specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, well, you know what? If a guy is going to marry a girl, he spends time with her, gets to know her, and figures out, can I spend the rest of my life
Hopefully,
with
yes.
her?
Yep.
And so then I thought the same thing about the priesthood, like because I wasn't in the prayer, I wasn't coming to, like the real, like, yes,
conviction.
Like,
this is yes.
Yeah, like this is for me.
I think that's more common. That's what I'm learning, is that it's rare when it is absolute, definite,
Right.
No doubt, no question. I think that's the idea of discernment, is what we're all learning through this program.
Yeah, I also find though that a lot of people look for that definite yes.
Sure, of course, it makes it easier.
And, exactly.
We all want things to be easier.
So honestly, I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to figure this out, I got to go date Jesus. And I gotta leave the world, leave my friends,
mm-hmm.
leave Friday and Saturday night,
the familiar,
and and I got to go figure this out. And actually, the thought of the story of Elijah when he called Elisha,
mm-hmm.
where Elisha says, "Okay, well, let me go pack my bags, say goodbye to my family, and let's go."
Yep.
And so anyway, so that's I went, and and a little bit that's where my dad. So my mom was ecstatic.
The next natural question is, coming 180 in your life, how did your family react when you told them?
Yeah, so my mom was ecstatic, and actually when I told her, she was actually sitting on her bed, and so I'd gone over to my parents' house and she was sitting on her bed, which I found out like 2 years ago was because she had a miscarriage.
Wow.
And so she was there sitting on her bed, and then I walk in the room and I say, "Hey Mom, I'm thinking of going to the seminary."
Wow.
So she pulls out a prayer for vocations that was in her bedside table, and she said, Josh, I've been praying this over the last 6 months. And she goes, actually, I wasn't even thinking about you. And because I never told anybody that I was even thinking about the priesthood. I never told anybody, not a soul. I just figured this is between me and God. And sorry for the grammatical mistake there. This is between God and me.
Yes, no, I've already said a couple, and every time I say it, I'm like, oh. But,
and so she pulls that out and she says, "Wow, I've been praying this," and she was great. My dad, on the other hand, it was a little more of a struggle for him.
Sure.
More because I think he was fine with me becoming a priest. I think he wanted me to finish college first.
Sure.
Because he said, look, if the priesthood doesn't work out, you have something to fall back on, and I'm not here to keep paying your college bills. Right? College just goes up, the cost of college goes up.
Fathers are fathers.
And
that's
I prefer you to finish now than a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wanted me to finish my degree first before I went. But I told him, no, Dad, I got to go now. I can't keep hanging on to this and trying to figure this out. So he actually ended up driving me up to the seminary because he wanted to see where I was going. My parents actually knew nothing about the Legion of Christ. I'd been introduced to them by a friend, and they knew nothing about the group or the order.
Sure, and to be fair, I think I wasn't sure I knew much about the order either. It's not as much a household name as Franciscan or Jesuit. When we think of order priests, we've got a couple we can name off, your average Catholic. And so what was it about the Legion of Christ? And before we continue, if you're just joining us, we are talking with Father Joshua West for Meet the Priest. And he's telling us now about just going to the seminary and with the Order of Legion of Christ.
Right.
What was it about that order?
I think first and foremost it was the missionary spirit about them, and just the desire to want to evangelize, and just share the good message of of our salvation and the love of God with the world. And and I think that one of the things that attracted me, at least this is what I heard, maybe it's not whether they told me this or not, but at least what I heard was that hey, there's 80% of the Catholics out there aren't even practicing their faith, and those are the people that we need to bring back to the faith.
Sure.
And so for me, that really touched my heart.
Yeah.
In getting out there.
You had kind of firsthand knowledge of it.
And I had firsthand knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe without even thinking about that, but yeah. And so getting out there, preaching to these people, inviting them to a personal relationship with our Lord. Bringing them back into the church. I mean, just really creating this army for God, for the church to go out there and not just evangelize non-practicing Catholics, but in the end, the whole world.
Absolutely. Now, when you were there, when you were in seminary and dating Jesus,
Right.
Did things seem to click pretty easily, or did you go back and forth a little?
Oh yeah, no, it was back and forth.
Yeah.
So that's even for me to pinpoint a day when I could say, this was the day I felt sure that I was called to be a priest. I don't have that type of experience. I think it's something that grew on me little by little.
Sure.
Ups and downs. Obviously throughout the seminary, I probably drove my spiritual directors nuts. Because literally, I would knock on the door some days and say, "Hey, Father, I'm out of here. I'm done."
Really.
and most of the time it was like, "Oh, well, yeah, whatever you want, great."
Yes.
But hey, let's talk about this. And so I actually remember after one of those conversations, right outside this particular spiritual director's door was an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And so after one of these tough conversations, I walked out and I stood in front of that image and I said, "Mary, if I make it to the priesthood, you make me ordained in the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe."
Wow.
And I was very specific about my petition. But anyway, so I have to say, Mary got me through the seminary, and Mary is, once again, she was an integral part of getting me through the seminary, and it's a relationship for me that was built in the seminary. Before the seminary, I really didn't. I always thought, look, I have God, I have Jesus. Like, why do I need this other person in my life? It just adds to my prayers.
Yes.
And I just prefer, Jesus, you're the guy, and I'm good with that. And so I think, just that experience of Mary really, really grew on me in the seminary, which is something that really got me through that.
Absolutely. And you talk about talking with your spiritual director through formation. Were there specific doubts or concerns you had, and how did you get past those? Was it through conversation? Was it through prayer? Was it kind of a combination? Are there any moments that stick out to how you were able to get through concerns or doubts you may have had?
You're at least, I'm 21 years old. I turned 21 in the seminary. That was a pretty hard birthday.
Now, you imagined it to be the year before, probably.
Exactly. Not to say there weren't already past experiences, but 21's a big birthday. But so that was, I remember that being a specifically difficult day. But also too, and then there were there were kind of smaller things. I remember one time, the seminary had a very strict schedule.
Sure.
And one time we went to bed and it was still light outside. And I was thinking, this is crazy. How can I be going to bed when the sun is still shining?
Right.
Nowadays, I'd be more than happy to go to bed.
Of course.
When the sun's still shining. But back then that was hard. I remember one time somebody took my hangers. And so you just got all these little things that kind of drive you nuts. And then you have bigger things. Like giving up your own personal freedom.
Yeah.
And not being able to do the things that you want to do. Marriage is, you're giving up marriage and the possibility of a family. That's that's a very tough thing.
Which, by the way, in marriage, people steal your hangers too.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You dodged them all in there.
Awesome. That's good to know. That's good to know.
Yes. I can attest to that.
Nowadays, anybody can steal my hanger.
No, okay, all right. That's not as much a concern anymore.
I'm not hung up on that anymore.
That's good to know. So to speak, hung up on it, but
right.
so I'm sorry. We're having fun here
That's
today.
right.
This is so fun. So could I ask, what, since you've become a priest then, since you've kind of completed this journey and had so much life experience and back and forth and put a lot of genuine thought into everywhere that you want to be and go, what's been the most joyful revelation you've had since becoming a priest?
Yeah, it's, well, first of all, I think if I can begin just by saying actually being a priest. I think a lot of times when you enter the seminary, it's about what you're going to be doing. And I entered the priesthood with the idea I would be doing missionary type work.
Right.
And so I think first and foremost, the great unexpected joy of the priesthood is actually just being a priest. And, walking with people, in their life, and you just being who God has called you to be, with in the different circumstances that God has placed you, and sometimes hard, sometimes very joyful, priestly ministries and priestly experiences. But just really being a priest, I think would be the first one, and then maybe just the things that I do as a priest. I have to say I love the campus ministry that I'm doing right now. Just working with these college students. And where they are in their life, walking with them as they're making life choices,
right?
And even from everything from the changing of majors to marrying, right, to religious life. Here at NC State, we had a couple of young men that went out to the seminary this past summer.
That's wonderful.
Which was awesome. And then for 2 of my years in Chicago, where I worked previous to here. I worked in a grade school, believe it or not, and so that had its difficulties. Stories about Noah's Ark only go so far.
Sure. Yep.
That was kind of interesting, working with, honestly, preschoolers all the way up through 8th graders. So in and of itself, it was a difficult experience, but yet at the same time, I just got to experience, and this was an unexpected joy, to experience the purity of the faith, where these young kids just love Jesus for who Jesus is. Because as we get older, we complicate so many things.
Absolutely.
And obviously we have difficulties that arise in our life, but to see these little kids that, they naturally just come up to you as a priest, and and you're like, hey, look, Jesus is walking by.
Yes,
I'm like, well,
yes.
I'd like to think I'm Jesus, but
it's a beautiful simplicity of faith.
Yeah.
It really is.
Exactly.
It's inspiring.
Exactly.
A lot of times.
And maybe just one little example of that was, I remember in a homily, I asked the children, I said, so what do we have to do to get to heaven? And and obviously the answers I'm looking for are things like prayer and the sacraments and kindness towards others and that type of thing. One little kid raises his hand. Actually, his name was Angel, by the way, and he says, "We have to die."
Wow. That's true.
That was totally true.
That's true. Yes.
Anyway, so just the great purity of faith that these kids exude in their life was just refreshing for myself personally as well. So.
Well, and before I go on to the last question I usually ask, I would love to connect kind of 2 of the pieces that you talked about, because you talked about being attracted because of the missionary idea. Now, being at NC State is not, an Indiana Jones type atmosphere, but like you said, and I don't want to be a downer certainly, but looking at statistics, we lose so many Catholics, in a sense, who are practicing between high school and college, a lot of times when people go away.
Right.
As you and I both know, probably from firsthand notice, and we're not the only ones, people tend to walk away from their faith, and it's really easy to do. So is it still a missionary goal? Like, you still feel like you have that mission heart while you're working with college kids, and how does that connect?
Right. So yes. So, and I would say that's actually where I think our Lord has transformed my heart, and actually this is something that Bishop Barron talks about a lot, and that is that the mission field is right here in the United States, and so I think maybe our Lord implanted within me that desire to want to be a missionary, knowing that, because I've never had an assignment down in a third world country, though my superiors well know that that's where I would like to be, but God has other plans for me, and just how many people out there So let me say this. I think it's a concrete jungle that we are called to evangelize, and it's not with machetes, and jeeps,
Right.
but it's with our missionary hearts, and it's with the sword of the Spirit, and and bringing the presence of God into people's lives. And so even for me, actually, it is a little bit ironic because pre-COVID, I celebrate Mass in the Tally Student Union Center on campus, and I mean I don't have a chapel there,
Right.
So literally I have a backpack with my Mass kit, and every day I'm walking onto campus with my little backpack full of my Mass items,
Sure.
and and I'm there celebrating Mass for these students. I have to set everything up every day. I have to set everything up. Luckily, I do have students that arrive early and help me set up, but every day we have to set up, and we have to take down, and we have to pack the backpack, and so I'm packing up the songbooks and the chalice and the wine and the candles, and packing everything up, and every day walking back and forth onto campus. So from that aspect, it still is kind
Sure,
of
it feels
quote
absolutely
unquote,
like a mission,
like
yes,
a missionary
yes.
Experience. But yeah, I mean, and these kids are so thirsting. And I think just going back to my own experience, because it's that time when you're figuring out your purpose in life. And this is such a pivotal moment in the faith for students across the country. And I think now that I've had this experience, I would almost implore bishops almost to make it a priority.
Absolutely.
High school and college students, a priority in their work to be so present on these campuses. And
absolutely, because they're being fed by lots and lots of informational sources that are not all for their best interest.
All these religion classes that they receive on campus, and not only that, other types of classes as well, where the Catholic Church itself, the Catholic Church comes up in engineering class, and just gets bashed and thrashed. Yes, we have to be there and do our very best to bring Christ.
And I keep thinking what a gift it is to have someone like you in a college presence who is very forthcoming about the struggles that you had and the reality of life that you lived. And do you have that same kind of candor and honesty with your students and when you're giving Mass? I imagine they'll hear this, so it's nothing you've hidden.
Right. Maybe I'll send this recording. No, actually, it is funny because a couple weeks ago, they actually asked me to sit down with them, and so I actually did a similar interview, which lasted about an hour. And they were straightforward. Like, do you have problems with sexuality and that field? And
Absolutely.
They were very straightforward and very open about that. And so I just said, look, I'm a man. I'm a human being.
Yeah.
And then in homilies too. I'll mention, maybe not that in that field per se, but I'll mention struggles personally that I've had. Actually, just a week ago, in one of the masses, I talked about just a few days before I was ordained a priest. These doubts that entered into my mind, and so I do try to be open and honest because I think they need to hear that these struggles that everybody has.
The reality,
of life. Yeah.
People just don't connect to inauthenticity anymore. I think there's just so much thrown at you that people try to weed through something they can't connect to.
Right.
So I think that's incredible. Looking back, is there something about your priestly work that has surprised you or that you didn't expect when your vocation began?
Definitely. Gosh, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I would say, guys, there's so many day-to-day realities that surprised me. Little things like I didn't realize how much administrative work is involved in the priesthood, and just running either a ministry or I actually used to run a retreat center some years back, and so I just didn't. That I think would be kind of a surprise.
Sure.
I didn't realize how much was involved in that. But just joyful experiences as well. I didn't realize how much as a priest, first of all, just the trust factor that people have in a priest, which continually needs to be, reinforced, because especially during these times, where there's so much scandal.
Absolutely.
But how much trust people put in a priest. I'm also surprised at how much people listen to the homily on Sunday, that may be surprising for lay people, because honestly, when I was sitting in the pews, I sometimes was totally toned out, and sometimes then all of a sudden you hear laughing, and you're like, oh, wow, what are they laughing about?
Oh, hey, they're focused. Oh, that's wonderful. That's a nice revelation. That's a good surprise.
But anyway, just how much I think the priest is involved in people's lives, I think is really one of the big, for me personally, one of the big surprises. People come to you with every problem, from hanger stealing to problems in marriage and things like that. Actually, one of my big surprises, I'll be open and candor about this, was how much a priest actually is a priest to his fellow priests. I would say that also was a huge surprise for me. I remember one time driving on a long road trip with a fellow priest, and we got to our destination, and we had a great conversation, an intimate conversation during the trip. And as we're getting out of the car, he says to me, "Thank you for being a priest to me," and that was
powerful.
That was powerful for me personally, to hear that. So I would say that was probably another joyful experience.
That's beautiful. I love that. Is there anything I didn't ask you, or anything that you wanted to share with people?
Well, actually, yes. If it's okay, if I could go back to that moment when I asked Mary,
yes, absolutely, please,
to ordain, not for her to ordain me, but to be ordained in the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So I was not ordained in the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. I was actually ordained a priest in Rome, at the Basilica
not too shabby.
Not too shabby. So she pulled her weight at the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls. But here's the beautiful thing. I was ordained on December 12th, which is the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Wow.
And so at least from my perspective, as I'm thinking about that, because that was a promise that I never forgot, that I had made to a petition that I had made to Our Lady, and now I'm thinking, gosh, you know what? I get to celebrate that every single year.
Every year.
Yeah.
That's absolutely beautiful. That is beautiful, and that is Meet the Priest for another week. Our thanks to Father Joshua West for visiting us today. If you missed any part of our program, you can play our past shows by going to Catholic540am.org and clicking on local programs. The Executive Director of Catholic 540 AM Divine Mercy Radio is Cecilia Flannery. Our Director of Programming is Peter K. O'Connell. The coordinating producer for Meet the Priest is Lucienne Pereira Passarin. Our engineer is Keith Flannery. I'm Mandy Howard. Thank you for listening. May God bless you, and say your rosary today.